And I very much would like to introduce Hank van Tilborg. He's a landscape architect and he's involved in a project Lefortovo. Is one of the survived landscape Russian-Dutch heritage by famous Nicholas Bidlow.
All right. Well, thanks for inviting me, Ivan. It's my pleasure to tell you all something about Lefortovo and the beautiful place in Moscow. I'll have to speed up the pace since time is limited, of course. Here's are the main partners we worked with in this project. You yourself, Ivan, did a very good contribution also from the TU Delft. And we have the partners in Holland on the left and the partners in Russia on the right, of course. Thanks from my side for all the energy that has been put into it. We're going to Moscow, to a place called Park Lefortovo. In the actual situation on the east side of the city. In this case, this is a 19th century map of historic Moscow on the edge of a city and landscape, so to say. In the actual situation, it's not on the edge of city and landscape, it's right in the heart of the big Moscow metropolitan area, of course. It has been surrounded by the city since then. Well, the two key players, the main players in my story are, of course, Peter the Great, with his big size, even he doesn't even fit on the photo, and Nicholas Bidlow standing beside him. I will be speaking about them shortly. Well, of course, we know the story of Peter moving to the Netherlands quite a few times and learning all kinds of stuff in science, in arts, but shipbuilding, etc. And I and the people in my team actually made, of course, the trip the other side around from Holland to Russia. But also Bidlow did. Well, my story starts over here. And to put it shortly, Peter the Great at some point asked Nicholas Bidlow a medicine to be his private medicine, to be his private doctor, which of course was a very important position because it made him very vulnerable. And Nicholas Bidlow, because he did quite all right, probably after he moved to Moscow with his wife, was the founder of the first military hospital in Russia, and being also, of course, the first military hospital in Moscow. And you see it here on this beautiful drawing made by Nicholas Bidlow. What you also see in this drawing on the left of the hospital is his own private summer garden, his retreat place, his hermitage, as he called it, little hermitage. That's the way he described it personally. And I want you to take a bit more close look at it. This is the layout of the garden, his summer garden, and looking at the John Dixon Hunt division in theory about the design of our green spaces, where he determines the first, the second, and the third stage in nature. That is, well, very well applicable to also his situation, with the old romantic first nature still there on the banks of the river Yauza, a side river of the Moscow river, and the second stage with all the fields with crops, and the third state with the cultivated nature being his designed garden. Well, Bidlow also made some beautiful pictures of the interior of that garden, being, of course, maybe a little bit exaggerated, we don't know, but it gives us quite a good impression of what it looked like. Well, you see pictures of this completely corresponding to the fashion of these days, early 18th century. If we look at the map I just showed, with Le Fortevaux, as we call it now, on the east, in the German Sloboda, being the neighborhood in Moscow where the foreigners lived, not only Germans, also Danish, Dutch, etc. That was the place where this takes place. The garden I just showed you, Bitlow's garden, was on the side of the hospital. The hospital is also indicated in this drawing, and the big more park area with the word summer garden in it. That's where, in the actual situation, Le Fortevaux Park is. And in this image of the 19th century, you already see that Bitlow's garden, with the beautiful images you've just have been seeing, is gone. It has become already a neighborhood. What we know of Peter is that he regularly visited Bitlow in his summer garden, and that he actually said, I want one of those, but of course, bigger and better. We know that from letters he wrote. And that was intriguing. So I wanted to go to Moscow and see that for myself. Well, what is there to be visited? It's the military hospital. It's still there. This is the courtyard where the two statues are. The garden is not there anymore, as I just said, but it's not to be visited. It used to be somewhere where you see the gas station in the back, the petrol station. So there's no remains of it visible. The Jauza is still there, although it has been transformed dramatically with the traffic, high traffic, well, almost highway-like infrastructure running on the banks, and the banks are now dominated by with hard surfaces, and it's not a soft landscape anymore. Well, and this is what Le Fortevaux Park looks like, with a lot of signs saying what it looked like before in history. But you have to look very closely and carefully to find it in the park. Because what it looked like, well, you have to look closely to find the remains, the elements of this place. It led to the point that I wanted to do a more complete research. So we again went to Moscow, spoke with a lot of people, did some research, and slowly the puzzle started to fit. These are some images of the so-called Golovin Pond, the oldest place of the park. And here's some images of the dam. And well, we actually found the remains of the cross-shaped pond, which literally Peter refers to in his letter when he asks, I want one of those. And of course he got it. The drawing we saw of Bitlow is you can envision the place, what it looked like in this same situation. So slowly the image got clearer and clearer. Well, here again, the main key players, General Lefort, Fyodor Golovin before when Tsar Peter came. And they have to be mentioned because there was some activity going on in the place before Peter was introduced. There was already a palace on the side of the Jauza on the other side, where Lefort had his winter palace. There was a summer garden of Golovin on the other side of the Jauza. And when Peter came and Bitlow made the design, he actually redesigned the place and enlarged it and made it into one ensemble, so to say. After Bitlow, an Italian architect, Rastrelli, came and he made the plan for the big layout in the more French style. And then at that point it was called Versailles at the Jauza. Of that, there are hardly any remains, because what you can see in these images is that after the water park that Bitlow designed and the enlargement of Rastrelli in 19th and 20th century, well, the city gradually has eaten up the enlargement, and what we have in the actual situation is again more or less the situation of the 18th century, speaking about size of the place. Well, what has happened since then, apart from the size? It has made a shift from a private garden, the garden of Peter the Great, to a public park. And you can question yourself, what does that mean? And it asked questions about how do we deal with that historic heritage, yeah? And that asked the question, what is really important in this place? Well, speaking about heritage, you can say, and if you look at Holland, but also if you look at Russia, there are a few ways of dealing with it. And one way is, well, you can ignore it, you can just destroy heritage and replace it by something else. That's been the case for example, with the Christ the Savior Cathedral. It had been replaced by a communistic open air swimming pool. And there's another way of dealing with heritage, and that is you can of course restructure it, rebuild what is gone. It has also been done at the same place again, because we now know again the Christ the Savior Cathedral being rebuilt again. And that's also applicable, of course, to the Fortevo. And the question is there maybe an answer in between? Is there room for a bit more nuance without destroying the place or reconstructing it completely? Well, the basis to do that and to have that discussion is the atlas we made, the cultural historical atlas we made for Le Fortevo. And I'm only going to show you some images out of that. First, I would like to explain the technique we used, and then I come to some conclusions. Well, the technique we used is the method of time layering technique. So it's really an atlas with a lot of maps, images in it, and it corresponds with the main periods in the development of this place. And you also see the development of Moscow in the bottom and the main key players on top. To show the technique, I'll use the time period of Rastrelli. And what we did in all these cases, so for all these periods, we did 4 things. We started doing research with base maps, historical base maps, and out of that we derived the structure. And we have been redrawing all these maps, so they really fit, they have the same size, the same scale. We use the same key, the same legend, the same colors, etc. So you can compare them. And out of that, we derived the components of a landscape being path, buildings, water, and green. And you can see the development of the place quite clearly. The second, what we did is we researched the usage of the place, which is difficult because it's almost everything is gone. So what we did is when we went and what the sources we did have of, for example, contemporary places nearby or examples in the Netherlands, and use that. The third thing we did is that's where the landscape architect comes in, and you see the drawings, they become more like sketchy, more comic-like, and that's on purpose because here's where we start thinking this is what might have been the idea of the designer. In terms of scale, in terms of composition, in terms of etc. Design principles. And then the last step in every time layer was what is still there? What can we actually still see? What are the traces of this period still visible today? Well, for example, for the Rastrelli period, there's hardly anything left. As you can see, there's a few remains of a canal, and there's of course the building, which is still in military purpose these days. But the whole layout of the park, etc., most of it is gone. Well, we did that for all time layers, and you can clearly see the Bidlow period, the Bidlow and Peter period is the purple period, and you can quickly see that most of the remains derive from that period, which makes it not because it's Dutch, but mainly because of that. It's the reason that we focused on that period. It's unique. It's a unique place that it's been done by a Dutch architect. Well, he was not architect, he was a medicine, but a dilettante, and he did a beautiful job designing the place in a way that's was not possible in the Netherlands because we don't have this kind of topography. Well, finally, to tell you something about that heritage then, what is the importance? Again, you see the situation on the top, the garden, his own garden, which is not there anymore. You see the hospital, the old Le Fort Palace, the Golovin Pond, and here the layout of Peter's wondrous water garden, actually in the Jauze, on the banks, some terraces, but really also literally in the Jauze, an island in the river with islands again in the pond on the island. It's a unique style and combination of elements. Here is the original plan we found, where you see in detail what he designed, and here you see really literally the cross-shaped pond I was speaking about. It's exactly the same that he did in his own garden, with the beautiful pictures you saw. So it's striking, and because of that, having the images of the Garden of Bitlow, we know what might have been the situation, because we know this cross-shaped pond. We know what might have been the situation in Le Fortevaux Park for Peter. And what we of course also have is the places that Peter has been visiting in the Netherlands, and also inspired him, of course, could have been inspiring him for the design of his own garden along the Jauza. Well, looking in a more architectonic way to the place, I was really astonished, because it's really well done. It's almost unbelievable that a medicine and not a professional trained landscape architect designed the place. It's really, it struck me enormously, because of the composition and the use of the topography, the relief of the site, the heights, the way he used the water and the access, and he actually did a great job. I won't go into depth, but you'll have to believe me, because the further we went in the analysis of the place, the more it inspired me how smart it has been done. Well, this is of course suggestion. Using these old sources, we made some kind of an inspirational image, impression of what it could have looked like. And we know, of course, we have documentation, but it was a splendid, marvelous place, on the banks and in the river, with in the front Gollovin's Palace, on the back Lefort's Palace, and this beautiful situation. Well, what we did to go to conclusion, we actually out of all this derived the 5 golden rules. If you take the heritage of Peter and Bitlow serious, you have to take it into account these 5 statements, the way he composed the plan, and the question is, of course, can you still apply them to this place? The design of this as a water garden, the chambers he designed, the use of the terraces, the use of surprise, and the theme of health, which is of course really makes sense for Bitlow being a medicine, a doctor. Well, here what's so interesting, his heritage is to design the place that used to be 2 separate gardens, and he made one ensemble. And how he did that is really smart, because he actually took these 2 places as the basis, and the system of access, an orthogonal system from the Golovin Palace and also Lefort's place, and he wove them together. And that's actually beautiful how he done it. And where it all comes together, where these 2 systems meet, you see the cross-shaped pond. It's right in the heart of these 2 interwoven systems. Again, beautifully done. So we're back at this place, which is now also still at the heart of the park. And it's also where you see the most dramatic, the system of the river at the low base, and the terraces on the high level. It's very dramatic. Of course, it's most of it is gone. There's no fountains in it. There's no planting. There's a lot of work to be done. Well, that then brings me to my final, the end of the presentation. It's a unique place. It is only possible in Russia, together with the efforts of the Dutch Bitlow, but it's really the combination of the 2, and what made it so unique, what has been there. Well, what can you do with that? What can we take out of this? Of course, we know it's time to evaluate the park out of this heritage. We know exactly now what is still there, so you know also what you should be protecting. But that, of course, is not enough. It's not only about what you would protect. It's also a place, being now a public park, which asked for new needs from a modern age society. It's a 21st place. So it's also about ecology. It's also about accessibility for people. It's about environmental quality, etc. So, and that's where the design task is then laying. Of course, using, that will be my statement, using the Bitlow principles, these 5 principles I've been speaking with you about, and with that, giving this place the attention it really needs, without destroying it or reconstructing it completely, because that's impossible. For example, alone with the Jauza, which is not there anymore, to flow, well, to free flow inside the area, and since it's now bordered by hard surfaces and cars, so it makes it necessary to rethink actually the future of the place. And but the key element, of course, is water. It was a water park, and it also should be and still be a water park. Means that it should be used with things happening on the water, in the water, etc. These are, of course, inspirational images. Don't take them literally, but do something with the water. Bring the water in. It's about the sight, the sound, the liveliness. On the left, you see images of the old situation. It doesn't mean we have to bring all that back literally, but the sensation, I hope, can be brought back to this wonderful place. Well, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Attention should go out to the bridges again as icons of this water park. And finally, there should be an answer to the situation with that highway actually running around the banks of the River Jauza, which is now has a negative impact on the way you actually the way the park is being experienced nowadays. And here's a student's proposal of how to deal with that, leaving the highway there, but enlarging the park, introducing a sort of a balcony, a lookout to the Jauza on one side, but also a lookout looking back to this beautiful place. And that's where I end my presentation. I went pretty fast, I'm aware of that. I refer to the atlas I've been showing you. It's available online, and it's also available in Russian, so you can check out for yourself. Thank you for your attention.